I'm Peggy Pirro, and this is Food From Here. It was a constellation of health issues for Britni Teeters that gave her and her husband Troy the impetus they needed to find a different way to live. One that didn't involve a stressful corporate job with hours upon hours spent in front of a computer. The couple purchased 11 acres of rural property on Evansville's west side with the intention of homesteading, growing herbs and vegetables, raising a few milk goats and pigs and chickens. They're now on their 7th year at Moonlight Hollow Farm, and we talk about what it's meant to make a living from their farm and how raising animals is part of the cycle of building healthy soil and a healthy ecosystem, about growing their vegetable plot into a market garden and their inspiration for all of it. At the end of our conversation, Britni shares her process for making medicinal salves and tinctures out of the herbs she grows. I think you'll enjoy this conversation with this enterprising couple who are creating a sort of Renaissance life on their farm. Britni and Troy, welcome to Food From Here.
It's good to be here.
We met the end of January at a local food event here in downtown Evansville that was put on by Urban Seeds and Local Source and the Bedford Collab. And you guys were there really information gathering, as I recall. Is that correct?
Yes. Newer to the community, looking for resources to help us build, and that event was the exact opportunity that we needed.
Let's start by defining what homesteading is, and then tell us why you chose that path for yourselves.
For us, it was about being self-sufficient and trying to improve the land that we were on. We're a small batch swinery and a small batch poultry producer. Just starting out, everything's really new, and we had these goals of producing stuff for ourselves, and it kind of turned into more than what we wanted for just ourselves. So we just kind of kept expanding on that. For us, homesteading is just about being sufficient and growing what we need.
For your family?
Yeah, for our family, and then turn that into showing others also how they can do the same thing.
Give us a timeline. Do you remember what year you moved out to that piece of land?
About 7 years now. So it was about 2017, I believe. We were doing a little bit before that, just a little home garden and trying to learn different ways of doing things on our own.
Yeah, self-sufficiency was our goal with the homesteading. So we've been able to do that with the pork production, with the coonies. They are lard pigs, so we're able to produce our own products from that, as well as our dairy goats. We've replaced our dairy products and are making body products with it. Chickens, they help complete the cycle. We produce hundreds of our own meat birds per year, and we operate an AirBnB to share our farm with others. We basically are first-generation farmers. We've learned ourselves through agritourism and farm tours.
So you visited other farms as you've learned more, as you've realized maybe what you didn't know, or you wanted to see what other people were doing. How far did you venture for that?
We went to Arkansas to a place called Dogwood Hills. We stayed, if that was our vacations. We would go out of state and go to other farms that had like Airbnb, and we would pick their brains when we got there, and we'd tell them, hey, we're interested in doing this. Is it all right if we just kind of pick your brain on how you got to this point and what led you here and things like that? That was our vacation, was let's go to another farm and see what they're doing.
Did you find that they were welcoming to sharing their information and happy to have you learning as you stayed?
Yeah. We didn't run into a farm that really wasn't interested in it. So we started learning real quick that the farming community was real welcoming, and we really enjoyed it.
Britni, you mentioned we might be jumping all over the place here, but I do want to bring this up. You mentioned that the pigs that you have on the farm right now are coonies. I was not familiar with this type of pig, and the day after I came out to your farm for a visit, I was at a friend's house, and I told her, you have to look up these pigs on the internet because they are the most adorable things. And of course, the first image she got was of a full-grown coonie, which is they're very distinctive and very handsome animals. Yeah. So what did the property that you bought on the west side of Vanderburgh County, what did it look like? And when you were looking at it, what made you say, yeah, this is the place, we can do what we want to do here?
The prior landowners had grown up there, and as different properties around him became available, he just purchased them up. So it is an awkward 11 acres, but it covered all of our needs, everything we were looking for. So we needed a bigger garage. His metal shop was expanding. We were trying to pursue bigger projects there. We needed a bigger barn to add animals, more space for a bigger garden. It even had a furnished apartment in part of the pole barn, which was our goal with the agritourism and an Airbnb. So that was even there. Again, more ground and pasture so we could expand. Water supply was a big. It's not the biggest lake, but we have had several meals out of it, and it brings cranes and eagles and the full life cycle. So, and the location, we're convenient to Evansville, but it's got its country beauty.
You mentioned a barn, and I guess I didn't notice it when I was there because I remember looking around and saying, well, there's no main structure, there's no main barn, except for the workshop that you indicated. And is that what you're talking about, or is it a different structure?
We have a little red barn kind of centralized there.
Yeah.
Everything kind of flows around that from the farm.
Okay. Well, I guess I was more interested in everything that was around that barn for me not to notice it. I mean, you have the goats and, of course, the pigs and the chickens, and they all have their areas. They all have their enclosures, but there's some intermingling, and the chickens they just go where they want to go, except for the ones that you have penned. So there's a philosophy at work there with this system of husbandry. Would you care to speak to that, Troy?
So we do like rotational grazing, try to practice regenerative farming. All of our shelters, except for the main red barn, are movable. So everything I've built for them, I can move around by hand. I don't have to have a tractor. I don't have to have anything to move it. So when we do that, we're keeping the pigs, for instance, in an area for about 2 weeks, a little less of 2 weeks, and then we move them to another area, and then we don't bring them back to that area for at least 90 days. And that's just to help with the worm load and parasite load, and it also benefits the ground. So we're running them real hard in an area for about 2 weeks, and then we move them off of that. So it builds the soil as well.
And the areas that you're speaking of, they have grass.
Yeah.
They're not just dirt lots.
Yeah. The coonies are a pasture pig. They actually eat grass, and they actually eat hay also.
Now that's a surprise to me that there are pigs that eat grass and hay.
Yeah. It's different than the traditional commercial pigs. You know, they get there way quicker, and we didn't really want that with our pigs. We wanted something our kids could go around. We wanted something that was docile, easy on the ground. They don't root. They do root a little bit, but nothing too much. They're easy on fences. They're good with other animals around them.
What is an issue with pigs rooting?
In a pasture, it can be dangerous for other animals. You know, if they root up a big hole and then you run a cow behind them, then you take the risk of breaking the cow's leg.
Sure, like having gophers or something, or voles or something in your pasture. Okay. One of the reasons they don't root is because they have short snouts.
Yeah.
It's what gives them their distinctive facial expression.
Yeah, they have a short snout that's turned up and dished. Which is all breed standard, and all of our coonies are registered coonies.
How big of is it a flock of pigs? No.
A herd.
A herd of pigs? How many do you have?
Right now we have 18, we have 4 main ones, adults that are breeding ones we started out with, and then we have 14 little piglets running around right now with them. So,
And how old are the piglets right now?
one litter is about 10 weeks, and the other litter is about 7 weeks.
So they're late winter.
Yeah, December 30th was the first litter of pigs we had born on our farm.
That's a milestone.
Yeah. It was an adventure for us who we're just figuring it out as we go.
The first time that you dealt with a litter of pigs ever?
Ever. We'd had goats born on our farm 2 years in a row now, so we had
And
puppies. So we've had a little experience there, but with pigs, we had
quite different.
we had nothing.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Was it exciting? Was it frightening? Was it
It was cold.
unnerving?
Yeah.
We spent several days waiting, watching, anticipating. I do remember it being cold. We actually camped out in the barn side by side, waiting for it to happen. There was one pig. The second pig, we watched and watched for days, and the 30 minutes we ran inside to grab a sandwich, we came back and she had all of her piglets. So as much as you watched, you can't prepare for the moment it's going to happen. The first one, we were there, and it was amazing. Quite different from a goat, that a little bit more dependent on you. The pigs, they come out running, ready to go. So beautiful, just amazing to watch it. It's incredible.
So one litter would be 6, 8?
Yeah, I mean, they can have anywhere from 2 to, I've seen 11, 13.
Okay.
They can support up to 14, between 12 and 14.
Different than goats, because goats have 1, 2.
Yeah. Our last one, they had 4, which one of them didn't make it, but 4 was pretty.
One goat had 4 kids?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a lot of babies.
Yeah.
For one.
Yes.
Yeah. What kind of goats are they? They're very friendly. I remember that.
Nigerian dwarfs, so they are smaller than your typical milking goat. We've found it plenty for our supply. We cannot drink enough milk to keep up. Plus, we have gallons going into the freezer for soap making. So he milks the goat. We have 2 goats milking right now. Mr. Moonlight milks it twice a day, and we're getting at least a half a gallon a day.
You do by hand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we try to do most of everything by hand or an older way of doing stuff. I mean, we do have a tractor, but most things we do a lot just by hand.
I would imagine it helps you know your animal.
Yeah, it gives you time with those 2, especially every day, to check them over and make sure everything's fine, and then gives you time with them. And goats are kind of pushy. They kind of it's almost like they tease you. They want to push the boundary of what they're supposed to do.
I respect that.
They keep you on your toes, for sure.
Troy, you mentioned the word regenerative. I'm wondering if you could share with us your definition of what a regenerative farm actually is.
With the way we move our animals and the rotation that we use, which will run goats and pigs usually at the same time, sometimes goats first and then pigs, and then we run chickens behind them. So we're just trying to build the ground up and use the next animal to kind of clean up from before and get what the animal before it couldn't reach, and just putting carbon back into the ground and building soil on our property instead of just having dirt or just have it like our woods was mainly invasive species when we moved in, and we've ran goats through it a little bit and the pigs through it, and it's actually getting real life on the ground instead of just thorns and stuff like that. We're actually getting grass coming up in our woods instead of things we don't want, things that aren't beneficial to the animals.
One of the things that struck me is it almost has a village-like feel. You've got your garden, which we'll talk about in a couple minutes, your vegetable garden. You've got a lovely space for an herb garden. How much of that was planned, and how much was just what occurred to you to do with that particular plot at the time that you were looking at it?
Yeah, everything definitely has a purpose and thoughtfully planned, but we do naturally let it fall into place. Our to-do list quickly change based on the priorities, whether animals are pregnant, butcher dates, camper reservations. Really just depends on the priority and serendipity. It falls into place. Some ideas stem from a market garden flow, smoothly processing the harvest to prepare for the distribution. So he's laid that out for our garden beds, the quicker crops to be closer to the rinse station and out the door. So we've picked up a lot of the layout from that design. A lot was water dependent. The water sources are kind of awkward on the property, so we had to work with those. The Airbnb was always a goal, and our property has multiple entrances, so it allows for that separate entrance. And it's very critical to maintain balance, so it allows to separate our home from the farm.
I want to touch on the camper that you mentioned. At what point when you were in the development of your farm did you add that camper, and what is it for?
We added that last year. We added a bus a few years back that we were going to renovate and make into a camper, and just with life being so busy, we haven't gotten around to that, so we decided to get a camper. At some of these farms that we've stayed at, we've stayed in a bus, we stayed in a little camper like we had, and to us it seemed like an easy fit for the farm. You know, it's a little bit up from a tent camping, you know, but so you have this shelter, and we built the outdoor shower for it, which we've enjoyed at other farms, like where they have a camper. It's been exciting to have people from out of town come and tour.
Is it registered as an Airbnb?
Yes.
Is that how people find it?
Yep.
So you've had a couple of guests?
Yeah.
What was that like, having people that you didn't know living on your farm for a few days?
At first it was kind of strange, you know, because we've got this 11 acres that sits about 1,200 feet off the road. So we're just kind of secluded back there. And then to just allow strangers to come stay on it, at first was kind of nerve-wracking, but it was a very cool experience getting to meet these people and know where they're from and then show them around a little bit.
I think we've learned as much from them as we would hope to teach them as well. Our very first were working on the Oakland branch library, and were able to show us how our pigs were doing the same they were doing with their herbicides to handle the invasive species. So that was very neat. They were excited. We've had musicians and kids running about, like refusing to leave because they love the animals so much. So yeah, it's eye-opening to see how much even we take for granted living with it every day. It's just our normal life, and it's completely different from most others.
So these guests weren't necessarily people who were interested in doing what you're doing. They just wanted a cool place to stay?
Yeah. We redone the inside of the camper a little bit. It used to be a dress shop before we bought it.
The camper?
The camper was. It was out of Owensboro, and somebody had a dress shop. And so it was already kind of set up the way we wanted it, and then we just added a few little touches. And
is it just the spring or summer season?
Yeah, we open it at the beginning of April, and then we shut it down at the end of October, I believe, and kind of take a break from it after that for a few months. And
yeah, about the time you're getting your harvest wrapped up and putting the farm to bed for the season, as if the farm ever really sleeps.
Right.
It's hibernation mode. Yep.
Yeah. Do you both work on the farm now solely, or are there side jobs?
Quickly became a full-time gig for more than one person, but our eggs are in more than one basket. We utilize the range of income to balance the different seasons of the year, for sure. So protein, produce, medicinal herbs, the Airbnb, agritourism, farm tours, and the Moonlight Metalcraft masterpieces. We would love to help fabricate some local farm-to-table restaurants with that, too.
So you're able to essentially make a living from your farm?
Yeah, nice. That was a big thing to us. That's also with the being self-sustainable, is being able to provide that revenue.
I want to return to a point that you were making earlier about the contribution of the animals to the farm. Wendell Berry wrote a lot about the value of the mixed farm, about the keeping of the nutrients on the farm to benefit the plants and the animals there. I mean, we're talking compost and vegetable waste and manure and so forth, staying on the farm to nourish it, which eliminates the need, or at least reduces the need, for inputs from outside, especially chemical fertilizers and herbicides and pesticides and so forth. I know in a the concentrated animal feeding operations that we see throughout the Midwest, they're enormous, and the waste products are produced from those operations in such great quantities that they're no longer useful certainly not useful to the operation itself, but it's so much, and they become a toxic problem. Yeah. Whereas on a small farm, especially a small mixed farm, they become those products become part of the nutrient cycle. Yeah. Would you like to speak a little bit more about this?
As mentioned prior, our practices of rotational grazing prevents like worm loads, parasites, smells. A lot of times we wonder how it smells, for us who are there every day. But the way that we move them around and rotate everything helps with all that. It improves the soil. We're trying to hill our ground to produce better meat. To have a good quality product, you have to have good ground. You have to have good soil, and which makes good grass, which is nutritional to them. And good food heals our bodies also. So we're healing our ground to heal ourselves.
One of the things that, and I will tell you as a recent visitor to your farm, it smells fresh. It smells like being outdoors.
Thanks.
I know what you're talking about because I've been around CAFOs and I've been in places that have fertilized their beds with chicken manure that I don't think it's just manure. Right. But your farms, it was just so fresh and enjoyable to be out there. So just put that fear to rest. Yeah. I did notice, or you mentioned when I was there, that you have moved from doing raised beds on your vegetable plot to just having, they're raised because the soil is being built up, but they're not bordered, they're not corralled like we would think of in a backyard vegetable raised bed. Is that to facilitate working the bed, or does it just make less sense to have it fenced in? For us,
you go way bigger without beds, and then we didn't have the best soil to begin with. It was a lot of clay, which is typical. But we knew that to get growing good, we needed to build soil. So we built the raised beds just so we could control the soil that we were growing in and not have to worry about the ground that was already there. And then we spread it out after that. We done that for about 3 or 4 years. And then when we were getting good returns on the vegetables, we decided to break it all loose, and that's what we started with on the actual ground.
Do you test your soil?
We have a little bit. We talked to Roger and Mary about doing it way more than what we have in the past, and a different way of doing it also. So we're moving towards that also. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that neither of you, when I came to visit you mentioned that neither of you had a farming background. So there's been a lot of learning going on over the past several years. Were there specific people, organizations, resources that you found most helpful? You mentioned the Winsteads.
Yeah, with meeting them recently, they've been a huge help for us. Originally, it was just finding people on YouTube that were doing it. I remember finding Joe Salatin years ago, and not really, I knew about him a little bit, but didn't really dig into anything more than just knowing who he was. And then over the last few years, we've really dug into his kind of philosophies of things and learned a lot from there. And then a lot of different ways to do things. It's critical for implementing like regenerative farming, for example. And we found no-till growers on YouTube and watch everything of his because we had no idea how to even do a market garden. It was just a garden, and we put stuff where we wanted it, but it didn't make sense when you look at it as a market garden. So that's been a huge help. Mary and Roger, Beautiful Edibles, huge help.
Seeing it live, firsthand.
Seeing it in person, actually working.
You're talking about their
setup.
Their setup.
Seeing that in person was a huge thing for us, like seeing it working, not just this person on YouTube or on TV or the internet.
And I think they only have, I want to say 4 acres.
Yeah.
And the house sits on, and their large garage sits on those 4 acres. So what's actually in production is considerably less than that, and still it's really impressive.
It is very impressive.
Very.
It's what I tell everybody, like, it's what dreams are made of as far as a market garden goes. For us, they're set up and doing it on a small acreage is a huge thing. I mean, we have 11 acres, but we share that with animals and pond and house and building. So,
Can you tell me a little bit more about what you learned from Joe Salatin, just so our listeners as well can get a little more familiar with his methods and how you've incorporated what he's
it's all
teaching?
the like regenerative farming and moving everything. So we do meat birds every year. We do a couple hundred, and we run them in chicken tractors, and we learned that from him. It's not a cage. It's just I guess it is a cage, but you move them twice a day, every day. So they have fresh pasture every day. You don't have to fence them in or worry about predators.
Describe this to me. It's like a cart? No, not a cart. It would be something that rolled on the ground that it had chicken wire around it. So you would put your chickens into it and then move it using a tractor?
No, you just move it by hand.
Oh, by hand.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's like a wooden frame box, and then it's got metal and then chicken wire or hardware cloth, something like that over it. And it's got wheels on the back and a rope on the front, and then you just lift it up and move it.
And the chickens are in there.
The chickens are in there.
And but there's nothing on they're on the ground.
Yeah,
they're
they're
able to claw, peck at the ground and find their insects
and eat bugs and grubs and grass and everything they would naturally eat.
Okay.
So
how big? How many square feet would one of these?
we have some that are 6 by 6, and we
Okay.
only run a few birds in them. Then we have them up to 10 by 10. You can make them as big as you want, but you have to pull them.
And you just pull them to a different location and then let them hang out there for a couple hours, half the day.
Yeah.
And then a different location.
Yeah, we just pull the back to where the front was, so you just move it right to the next spot.
So tell me about the challenges. Yeah. Were there things? No, I'm sure there were. Tell me about the challenges that perhaps you didn't foresee or that you couldn't plan for.
I think my biggest unforeseen challenge is honestly consumer awareness. We've found our community to be so undereducated on so many of the benefits of what we do and why we're doing it the way we do it. It's difficult to produce and educate so consumers understand all the benefits and the price tag that is attached. So I think that's been my biggest challenge is I understand, why doesn't everyone else?
Yeah, it's how difficult it is to get protein to people's plate. I mean, you can go to a USDA facility, but it's pricey. You know, that can add hundreds of dollars to an animal for processing. So you can use smaller custom facilities, and that's when you get like the not for resale. You have state inspected facilities and custom facilities where there's loopholes where you buy the whole animal on the hoof or half of it on the hoof. But if we could get it easier to get to people's table would be great. But it's very hard, and at an amount that people can financially afford or even have space for. And not everybody has a giant freezer they can put a whole cow in or a whole pig, you know?
Yeah, right.
And they also might not have $800 to drop on that animal.
Let's go into a little bit more detail there because that's a very opaque area to most shoppers who don't buy a quarter of a cow or a half of a pig or whatever. If you're going to grow an animal for sale, what do you have to think about? Because you can't process it on your farm.
You can't process it on your farm as far as pigs and cows. There's numbers of chickens you can do, but pork and beef, you can't do that on your farm and sell it. So you have to find a facility, and then to get into facilities can be even harder. It got way harder during COVID. Some facilities are 6 months to a year out. Some pigs don't even live that long. So if your facility is a year out, you're guessing on how many pigs you're going to have for that spot. There is talk of a thing called the Prime Act, which would help custom processing places and the farmer actually just sell cuts instead of a half or a whole or a quarter, then if that were to go through, that would help.
Is this a state or a federal?
Federal.
Okay.
Thomas Massey out of Kentucky, I believe, is who
Yes.
introduced that a few years back. It still hasn't been approved, but it would make it a lot easier for smaller farms, and it would make it a lot easier for just the everyday individual
Consumer.
to get that product,
Because as it is now, you can't butcher an animal on your farm. You can do chickens, a certain number of chickens, but so you have to find a facility. It has to be a USDA approved facility in order to be able to sell to, say, restaurants or grocery stores.
Or cross state lines.
Or across state lines. Okay. So there are a lot of regulations, and they're put in place to maintain safety and to maintain sanitation. And for a small producer, these are significant hurdles.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't have a lot of facilities here in southern Indiana. I think maybe just a couple.
Yes. I mean, USDA, I think, depending on where you classify southern Indiana, there's Daywigs and Hobstadt. And then there's some others that are farther
Somebody's in
northeast.
Celestine.
Yeah.
But not very many.
Not very many.
So we want local growers. We want small mixed-use farms. We want all the benefits that has to offer, but a lot of the infrastructure that we need is still missing.
Yeah.
It doesn't support the customer's needs. They don't want a full freezer of meat. It's the same processing, the same facility. The small custom butcher could cut the meat the same way, and you could buy it by piece instead of the full animal. So it would remove that restriction and allow consumers to...
It makes people that want to make that transaction able to make that transaction. As far as a consumer that wants to buy from a small farm, but realizes that when that small farm has to take it to a bigger facility, a USDA facility, that price goes up. There's nothing the farmer can do about it.
Correct. Right.
But there's also nothing that the processing place can do about it, because when you're federally inspected, the cost to run your facility is also way higher.
It's sort of like trying to go organic and get that seal of approval. It's very expensive to do that. Let's take the flip side to that question that I asked you about the challenges. What has surprised you? What has delighted you? What has brought you maybe some unexpected satisfaction?
The biggest surprise has honestly actually been the support from our growing community. This field isn't cutthroat like any others in our prior experience. The support, it feels beautiful. I mean, we met you through the community and the event at the library. Just Mary and Roger reaching out, it seriously was a huge switch that flipped. And we felt everything we were doing, somebody, if it was just one person, would appreciate. And to have their support, that means a lot, because we have always wanted to make the sauce for Pangea. So, no, they're amazing. So the support is what keeps us going. So,
let me ask you. While we were talking about infrastructure in the community, and we of course mentioned the processing facilities, the infrastructure is coming along here, but there are still things that are just not yet in place here. What does a farm like yours need from the community in order for it to flourish and in order for the community to flourish?
Support, not just financially, but more awareness and understanding of what it takes to run a small batch swinery or a small batch poultry operation or a small market garden, and more awareness of what is being consumed by the consumer and what you're eating.
I think less dependency on the big farms and less government restrictions with the Prime Act, allowing us to do smaller farm to smaller consumer transactions. That Prime Act would allow us to sell the cuts, so that would be huge.
Yeah. A lot of people we talk to, I'm always telling people about the Prime Act. It's just something that I heard about and I started looking into, and when we started this, that's your biggest hurdles is all the regulations and how you get around that, not really around it, but how you deal with it on a small farm. We don't have a lot of capital to pay all these people to get to the next place and the next thing, So at a small scale, you need a little bit of help in that.
Yeah, and if that help can come from a community that has a greater awareness of what it takes to bring that food to their table. Things are very disparate here. It's hard to bring everything into a common weave of all these separate threads of the growers and the consumers and the retail outlets where you can find the things, the processing places and so forth. So there's a lot of weaving that needs to be done here, which is great because it gives us an opportunity to do that. And there's a lot of good work that can happen.
Yeah.
You're operating your fruit stand again, your food stand, I should say, vegetable. Mm-hmm. Do you guys have fruits out there?
No.
Trees,
we have some fruit trees.
Okay. But your vegetable stand will be coming online later this year when your garden is producing, so midsummer, I would say. People can interact with you there. Where else might they find you, and what else might you be hoping to offer?
Yes, we hope to have our farm stand open for sure on Fridays for our first dibs before the farmers market, the Evansville Farmers Market on Saturday mornings.
And they're opening, I'm sorry, interrupted you there, but they're opening end of April. Yeah, yes. In their new location. Yeah. Okay, yes. Continue. Go ahead.
We've also signed up for the second annual Witches Market. Last year, there was a line out the door, so they have expanded locations. There's going to be food trucks, so there is a chance we could even possibly rig something up by then to help get our food into a food truck for the event.
And it's called the Witches?
The second annual Witches Market.
Witches Market. And where is that held?
I am not sure of the new location.
All right. I'll check it out, and it'll be in the show notes. No problem.
Okay.
And anything else that you're looking forward to?
You can always reach out via social media. We can schedule a visit, a farm tour. We do our morning meditations with our animal chores, so come join us.
Britni and Troy Teeters, thank you so much for joining me today on Food From Here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Britni's herb garden has grown considerably over the years and includes familiar culinary herbs like oregano and thyme, as well as medicinal herbs like comfrey and mullein and calendula, which is a marigold, all of which have been used for centuries to treat a wide variety of conditions and ailments. I asked Britni to talk us through the process she uses to make one of her comfrey salves.
Yes, it is not the most complex, but it is fairly time-consuming because it takes days to collect enough. If it's calendula, for example, enough have to bloom. We have to dry them and then preserve them. So we've tried different carrier oils. We're going to introduce our lard next, so it'll be fully home-based. But yeah, then you just wait. So I like to soak mine in the full moon for a little extra healing. But yeah, the longer you let them soak, the more potent. We strain them and tincture them up, label, and distribute. So it's enjoyable, just a little time-consuming. But while we're harvesting the vegetables, it's just another basket. So.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever teach a class on how to do that? Or would you consider teaching a class on how to do that?
I think classes are right up our alley. So I would love to see Moonlight Hollow be a facility for learning. So if we could teach chicken butchering, herb tincturing, homesteading, homeschooling, whatever it is, I hope we have something to offer for everyone.
And that's the show. You can look for Moonlight Hollow at the Evansville Farmers Market, which opens April 27th at 815 John Street in downtown Evansville. Join me again in 2 weeks for another visit with the people who grow and produce and prepare and serve the food we eat here in southern Indiana. Food From Here is a production of Tri-State Media, home of WNIN-FM and WNIN-PBS. I'm Peggy Pirro. Thanks for listening.